And I suppose obviously you touched on your refereeing side of things. I'll definitely touch on that in a moment. But just going back to what you were saying previously to that. Obviously, you were mentioning like tactics and whatnot. Like, what do you think went wrong for Mayo in all those All Ireland finals? Because for me, they were definitely good enough more often than not to beat Dublin in those All Ireland finals. And obviously, it is a very tricky issue because there's a lot to it, I think. But like, in your opinion, where do you think it's why do you think Mayo haven't won All Ireland in such a long time?
Look, and it's funny you ask me that question, and it's almost like we're talking about a death in the family. Like, you know what I mean? That's how it affects a Mayo person. Yeah. I feel sad now, Aaron. You know, to be honest. But look, the thing is, when you're watching a great movie and you're watching Batman, and like without the Joker, like it doesn't make it as great of a movie. You know, you kind of need that competitive edge. You know, you always need it. You know, many people have watched The Last Dance on Netflix, and you know, you need that rivalry of various teams that came up against the Bulls and made them the great team that they were. And Dublin players, like, I've been lucky enough to play in Dublin myself, and I got to know a lot of the Dublin players. You know, they appreciate what Mayo have brought to the competition. Do you know what I mean? Like Dublin, like it's tough to lose to the likes of Dublin, obviously, but like, you have massive respect for them too, because they've gone out and done it, and they've done it, whether it's been by a point or whatever else. Last year, obviously, you know, it wasn't beaten. Dublin deserved to win. That's just the way it is. But Dublin have done it over and over again. Mayo have been respected because they've been such great opponents. And when you ask me how Mayo have lost those games when there's been like a point in it, we've drawn with Dublin, we've had a sending off, you've had a sending off. It's very hard. It's a very hard one to call. You know, Pol Joy back in the day said, a grain of rice would tip the scales in some of these games, and that's what it was. Like, I just can't, you know, say what exactly it was on the day. Maybe Dublin just had a bit more nerves, you know, in front of a crowd or whatever else. But there's been very, very little in it. One thing I will say is that in some games, the Mayo would start with their best 15, and Dublin mightn't start with their best 15, but might steady the ship when they bring on the older players. Like, you know, the likes of Bernard Brogan was coming on, O'Gara was coming on, Michael Dara McCauley, if he didn't start, he'd be coming on. You know, a good Mayo cousin, Kevin McManaman, would be coming on. And there were some big names to roll in, like, you know what I mean, when you just want to steady the ship and see it out, where Mayo mightn't have had the strength and depth, you know what I mean? And, you know, there's certain players, you know, the likes of Keith Higgins, Cullen Boyle, you know, Shamey and Aidan O'Shea, Andy Moran, and these fantastic players. I could go on and on, the O'Connors, I could go on and on about lads that have been there, like David Clark, you know, goalkeeper of the year. And they've been there and they've been good enough. And it's been a grain of rice that had tipped the scales and not in their favour. You know, we've had a few hiccups with giving away penalties, dropping certain players, you know, making mistakes.
Do you think the criticism is fair of Mayo that's kind of thrown their way sometimes, like, you know, the likes of Joe Brolly and whatnot, kind of going on Mayo?
No, and I mean this wholeheartedly. Joe Brolly, you know, he's a very intelligent man. He says some great things. He's got great foresight. He's a guy that, you know, I've met him once or twice, and I'd love to sit down with him, you know, more often, because, you know, he's one of those guys that would educate you when you're in the room with him, you know, in terms of his thinking. But kind of some of the abuse towards Mayo has been very unfair. You know, he's won in All Ireland with a Derry team that, you know, had one or two decent players, and that's all they had, and they managed to scrape in All Ireland. Mayo have had some fantastic players that have, like, look at all the All-Stars Mayo won, and they won those All-Stars out of their own merit. You know what I mean? And you know, the Mayo players are household names, where there's many other county winners, even from counties like Kerry and Dublin, that mightn't be as household names as the Mayo players. And it's been very, very little that's done it along the way. I think with all the finals we've lost in Croke Park, I think the worst was actually we drew with Kerry in Croke Park, and that game was obviously refixed for Croke Park, and these are the things that happened. Like, and it was a crazy game at the time, and then that game was fixed for the Gaelic grounds in Limerick, because a high school football team was being played in Croke Park at the time, which makes no sense at all, but that could be a story for another day. Like, because, I mean, I thought Croke Park is for Gaelic games, not for some high school bunch of kids coming over from the US, but that's what happened. And when we went down to the Gaelic grounds in Limerick, that was where our famous clubman, Mayo Mick, went onto the field to have a word with the referee, but because most of the people in the crowd were feeling the same way. It was a game that so many decisions went against us that it broke us. It actually broke our spirits as well, because it's been something like that. Is this actually possible? Like, are we ever, going to win in All Ireland? And it's funny, that was a semi-final, and that stood out more as a hurt than any other final, because we were good enough. We've been good enough so many times, and there's been nothing in it. Like the time Killian misses the last ditch free, you know what I mean? And Lee Keegan throws the GPS at Rock, but like, to be fair, I don't feel that was a free in the first place. We could go on about it, but like, there's just, if you're to beat Dublin in Croke Park, you have to beat them well. You know what I mean? You can't take any prisoners. Like, you have to beat them well, and we've gone up at times against Dublin. We've let the lead slip. We've made one or two little mistakes, but Dublin are a machine, and you have to hold our hats to them too. Like, they're very, very good, and you could argue that they're playing in their back garden as well. But like, look, that's just the way it is. It's the same with anyone playing Dublin up there. You know what I mean? And it's not fair on blaming these things in Dublin. That's just the way it is. But look, it's tough, and what I feel the most tough about this year is that, as I said, last year we had a great celebration in New York where, I was lucky enough to actually host an event along with David Brady, who's an idol of mine from geez, I think he done about 12 years playing for Mayo. He'd probably correct me with that now if he sees this interview. But an absolute stalwart and a legend of a man. And we raised funds for the Mayo team, both in New York and back home as well, as part of the Mayo Foundation. And to see the amount of people out in places like New York that traveled from all over America that were Mayo supporters, it really opens your eyes and appreciate like where you come from, because of where we're from in Mayo. A lot of people have emigrated over the years, but they've held on to that Mayo-ness the whole time, and then people feel let down all the time, and the Mayo players feel let down, letting them down all the time. But it's just one of those things. It hasn't happened yet. It will happen. We won under 21 All Ireland back in 16. It will happen. It will happen. It's just not yet. And unfortunately, part of the reason we're such a famous team is the fact of the story behind it, which has been a tough one. But look, what are you going to do, Aaron? Like, it's sport. Sport isn't always fair. You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah, no, and look. Listen, I definitely, they're definitely one of the best teams of all time. Definitely the best team to never win the All Ireland. Well, in 70 years anyway. At least this current team. But definitely even like even from going to a lot of the All Ireland finals in Croke Park and speaking to a lot of Mayo fans, like, I've always had a lot of time for Mayo fans, even despite the Dublin Mayo rivalry and what what goes on there. But like, I've always said, like, definitely, I remember even 2012 when Mayo beat Dublin and they were playing Donegal, and I knew the way Donegal played, obviously very defensive. Dublin had played Donegal in 2011. I remember going into the Mayo playing Donegal, I was like, I actually want Mayo to win this final. And to be fair, that was before the Dublin Mayo rivalry had really heated up. But look, listen, it would be a weird one to see Mayo beat Dublin in a final. Maybe if they could beat a Kerry, that would kind of soften.